The following presentation is a gift from the team at Streamline Publishing, publishers of Fine Art Connoisseur, Plein Air Magazine, and weekly newsletters Fine Art Today, Realism Today, Plein Air Today, and American Watercolor, and events, the Plein Air Convention and the Figurative Art Convention. We offer over 400 different art instruction tutorials and ultra high-quality video by the world's leading artists. If you like what you see, help us support our artists and our team with your purchase. Each video aired has a special discount code for today only in the comments section with a link to the video offered. And to see everything we do, or if you want to receive notice of new releases, new products, and new events for artists, simply click the other link, which says, see everything we do. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Eric Rhodes, publisher of Fine Art Connoisseur and Plein Air Magazine. Thank you for watching today. We're here every day at 3 p.m. giving you free samples of videos that we've produced, over 600 of them as a matter of fact. Today we have one called Palette Knife Painting with Michele Byrne. Enjoy.
Hello, I'm Michele Byrne. Thank you for joining me. Today I'm going to show you how I put the human figure into my paintings. So the theme of most of my paintings is the art of conversation. So I like to capture the human interaction between people and kind of tell a story to my work. So I'm going to do today a studio painting derived from some studies that I did while I was in Cuba in February. So we're going to start off by looking at some of my sketches. I'm working for this studio painting, I'm working from three plein air paintings that I did while in Cuba. My favorite thing about painting in Havana was the architecture and the people and the arches and the cathedrals. So this is all, painting is going to be a little bit of all of my favorite things. So one of the paintings I did was this restaurant, and the whole time I was there it was Cuban music playing and lively and action. So this painting was done standing on the street looking down through, and I just loved the whole activity that's going on. So part of these umbrellas and people will be incorporated under this umbrella. And then the other painting that I really liked that I did there was this one. And this was actually the same cafe, but I was standing under an archway looking into the cafe. So that's also going to be incorporated into some of these umbrellas because I like the waiters with their white red suspenders. And the third painting, which I don't have the actual painting because I sold it, but it's this cathedral, which I absolutely love that place. So that's one of the spires that's going to be back there. And while I was doing this painting right here, I was standing under this archway. So I'm kind of incorporating all three paintings I did and the three things I loved about Cuba, and I'm trying to incorporate them into one painting. So I started off by doing a value study. So this shows what I'm thinking is that the high point of contrast will be right over here. And it's going to be my darkest darks, my brightest brights, and my most colorful things. So they'll all be right in that area. So that's the theme of this whole painting. So I want your eye to come across here and go up around the arch and finally land here. These guys are walking into the scene, so they kind of give it some more energy. So I'm working really hard on the composition on this one. So as you can see, there's a grid underneath here. So I've been working a lot with composing my paintings, and this is the grid that I started with, because basically, it should be this way. Basically there's two paintings going on. One of them is underneath this arch, and one of them is under this arch, and I want them to feed into each other. So I use this kind of grid to do my value sketch, which I can show you right here. I put that on top of it. So it kind of divides this half and this half. And I had actually done the whole thing in reverse. And I can show you this painting, because I actually had done everything I just showed you in reverse. And I was looking at it, and something was really bothering me, because this was supposed to be the focal point, but I wanted that to be the focal point. So I talked to a few people. I belong to this Academy of Composition, and we meet up online. And what happened was one of the men in it said, try flipping it. So I flipped it, which you can see over here. And for me, it read so much better, because as Americans, we read left to right. So I think starting on this side and bringing your eye over to there worked so much better for me personally than starting over here. So I flipped the whole thing, which is something that I don't usually do, but to make it a better composition, I thought I would try it. So throughout the painting process, I might be picking this one up because I like the colors on here. And this is just a copy. I took a photo and printed it out, so it's a little lighter. So if I'm picking this up at all, it's to match the colors. So I just wanted to clarify that so you're not confused. So I'm going to start by putting, just like value wash on top of the whole painting, because that's usually what I do. I don't like to start out with a blank canvas, like pure white one. And I usually don't really draw it, but since I put so much work into the composition and composing it, I'd rather just have it correct right from the beginning. So I'll be picking this up and looking at color throughout my painting process. This is one of the tools that I keep in my backpack all the time, and when I'm in the studio, I have about 3 of them, different lengths for big paintings, small paintings. This is the shortest one that I keep in my backpack, but it's just for showing me where the verticals go and to make sure they're vertical, because as a right-handed person, almost everything I've painted my whole life goes leans this way, so then when I go to frame it, I have to try to cock it within the frame to make it look straight. And usually left-handed people, they paint like this and their things lean to the right. So I keep this with me all the time, and I draw guidelines so that as I'm painting, I can keep the things looking vertical. Because the last thing I want to do is have it look like all my paintings, all my buildings are leaning. So I've already drawn some of them on here, but there's just a couple more. And I can slide this across, usually across the top of there, and hook it on the canvas or whatever I'm working on. So I put most of these in here because I just want the arch to be, straight up and down. So there's 1 or 2 here that I didn't draw, and I want to just put them on. And, most of these lines, of course, they're not going to be seen, so it doesn't matter how long how dark I push, because since I paint mostly with the palette knife, everything's going to get covered up anyway. So that's just, I also put some horizontals, because this umbrella actually is going to line up with that one, the bottoms, so I'll move this up a little bit. That line probably won't be there. So it's just another thing to draw your eye. Like, as you're drawn in over here, this umbrella should shoot you over to this scene, and then up and around, back down here. So that's my plan. And so I have a basic sketch on here. The grids underneath, that helped me to just figure out where everything was. And I didn't really draw the people in there because I'm not really sure yet how they're going to be. But I also did some little sketches of how I thought, maybe how the people would be sitting. This man here, of course, he's walking the other way now. So one of my favorite things about the plein air paintings that I did was this one man standing under the umbrella. I don't know, there's just something about it that just resonated with me, his posture, like he's really tall, just looking down at the people. So I think I want to put him in there somewhere, but I'm not sure yet where. So I guess I'll start with the wash. I always put a wash in. So the foreground's going to be cool in the shade, and then it's going to be, the distance will be in the sunlight. It's going to be warm. And, most of my paintings do tell some kind of a story, and I want them to. So I want it to look like it's a really sunny day, and all these people are sitting under here having a grand old time, and this couple over here, I don't know if it's going to be a couple, but a table that are just celebrating that they're really happy to be in Cuba, and the sun's out, and just like a happy feeling. So I try to make my paintings about good feelings, because personally I love to sit outside under an umbrella and in the sun, so it's something that resonates with me, and that's why it appears in a lot of my paintings. Why don't we take a look at my colors? This is typically what I lay out on my palette, plein air and at home. I use the same colors, I put them at the same spots, I always know where they are, and I'll go through them. So I use Cobra, the water, solvent-free oils, so this will be just a can of water over here, and they're great for traveling because I don't have to bring, you know, turpentine or anything. So these are the colors. This is ultramarine blue, and sometimes I use cobalt, but lately I've just been using ultramarine, and there's actually a cobalt ultramarine, but this is just ultramarine. And this is called Permanent Green Deep, and that is exactly or almost the same as Viridian. It's not quite as powerful and overpowering as Viridian is. It's a little more subtle, but that's Permanent Green Deep. And this is called Madder Lake, and it's the same as alizarin. In fact, I think before alizarin was called that, it was called Madder Lake, so that's just the more historic name. And this is Transparent Oxide Red, and I don't use that as much. I used to kind of use that all the time, and it was nice for underneath paintings where you're not going to paint on top. But now that I use a palette knife, I don't use it quite as much, but I still keep it there just in case. And this is Cadmium Red Light, which is a color that you can't mix from anything else. It's a nice bright zinger color that I'll use usually for focal points or something. And this is Yellow Ochre, Cadmium Yellow Deep, and Cadmium Lemon, and then Titanium White. And I usually don't put the white out till later because it just gets in the way, but this is just a pile of grays from I was painting yesterday, and this is a pile of darks from yesterday. So at the end of the day, I scrape them all together and use them for the next painting because they usually can be used somehow. And I'll put a lot more white out at some point, but just to get the wash started, I don't need any white. So I'm going to start with the background here, which I want to be warm, so I'll just put a real washy, warm, yellowish, yellow ochre, maybe with a little bit of alizarin in there, and just kind of wash it over there. And you know, it's shockingly yellow, but it's just to put a tone down there. Because that's the sunny, warm part of the painting, so if I put something bright underneath there, it will glow. You know, little bits, sometimes with the palette knife everything gets covered, but if it doesn't, there'll be little bits of that shining through, which will make it, you know, more cohesive as a background, sunly lit area. So I'll just wipe some of that off. So I can still see my drawing underneath there, basically, but it has a nice wash. And then I'll clean off all that yellow and put like a cooler wash for where the arches are. There's something about arches that I'm really drawn to, so when I was in Cuba, I didn't paint them. I was so absorbed in being right up in the scene and being with the people, and I didn't paint many arches at all. I think there's one or two, but I just love arches. So I'll put the cooler wash on now. I know a lot of artists have their favorite paper towels, but it doesn't really matter so much to me because I'm not really using it as a tool. Sometimes I use it to manipulate the paint when it's all on there. Sometimes I use tissues. But okay, so for the cooler color, I'm going to just use the transparent colors of the Madder Lake and Viridian. Just see how that looks. And just so that I don't completely lose that lamp, I'm just going to try to paint around it a little bit. just for now. When I was in Cuba painting, the particular painting where I was standing under this archway, I was standing here painting, and there was a Cuban that stood here, and he talked to me the whole entire hour and a half or 2 hours that I did this painting, and he spoke in Cuban, in their language, really loud and boisterous the whole time. And I kept saying, "I do not speak your language. Do you speak English?" And he'd go, "No, no, no." But then he just kept talking. And it was comical because he just kept talking to me, even though I had no idea what he was saying. But that's one of the things I love about plein air painting. Most artists don't like to paint in the city because they like the calm, serene landscape. And I love landscapes. I love being in landscapes, but I like to paint people. So I like to interact with them. And that's what I'll remember about standing in this spot is that man. And I have pictures of him, and he actually bought me a coconut to drink from, and just a very sweet man, but I have no idea what he was saying the whole time. And so that's what I think about when I think of standing under this arch to do the painting. So now for the figures, I'm just going to wipe this down a little bit. And this underneath wash dries really fast when it's in water, especially when you're outside. I mean, this will be dry in no time. So the figures, I want them to be a little bit darker, obviously, than the arch, or they won't show up. But I want them to be very subtle. I don't want them to jump out at you. I just want them to be kind of there, drawing your eye into the picture. So with the paper towel, I want to remember to keep some kind of highlight, from this light coming in. I want to just keep his one shoulder a little bit lighter so it'll indicate that there's a man there walking, but it won't be jumping out at you. And same as this guy over here. He's walking into the scene as well. And as long as I have the height of them, they're kind of lined up with the umbrellas, that should work. As we're talking about figures, there was something I want to show you. I want to try to get this point across because it's something that my students have a problem with a lot. And it's the fact that when you have people walking, always, if you're standing up and they're walking, their heads will always line up. So if they're farther away, their feet will just be up higher. And if they're close, their feet will be down lower. So that's something that a lot of times students, if they're trying to show you people walking down a street, they start making the people, it looks like they're going up a hill, which if they are going up a hill, that's fine. But if they're not, their heads always line up. There's shorter people and taller people, but generally they all line up. Now here, this was up, you had to step down off of there. So these guys' heads are going to be a little bit higher than the people down here because there was a couple steps off of there. But that's one thing that's really important to keep in mind when you're out plein air painting or painting people in the studio, that their heads always line up. And if you are at the beach or something, it's the same thing. This was down in Key West, and the beach, of course it goes downhill. So their heads start going downhill a little bit because the ground goes downhill. Now the only way that doesn't work if you're sitting, it could change it, or if you have a bird's eye view and you're looking down on people, then of course their heads wouldn't line up. Or if you're laying on the ground, they wouldn't line up. But if you're standing and other people are standing, their heads always line up. And then as far as umbrellas go, this is another thing I want to point out before we start. This happens a lot in my classes. People always draw their umbrellas like that, and I don't think I've seen many. If an umbrella is not put all the way up, it's like that, but generally they're pretty flat out. So those are two things I want to tell you right from the start because it's something that people, when they take my class, they'll put umbrellas and people in, and they always do that, and I never really understand why. So when you're out painting, if you just stand there and put your brush like this on the scene or whatever, and bring it down to your canvas, you can get the angle. Because if you go like this and you end up painting like that, that's quite a difference. So just keep that in mind if you're doing umbrellas. And the same as people. Measure the people and what the height is above their heads to the umbrella and below them. Because a lot of times people do this. They have them way tiny, like these are gigantic, tall, tall umbrellas. And then they tend to make them like 1, 2, 3, 4, like fence posts. And that's something that I think we all just do it automatically, because I have to think as well. You know, you want to have them look like they're in a conversation. You want it to look natural. And that's what's the most important thing about putting figures in your painting, is to keep the people looking natural. So even if you just sketch people someday, or just do silhouettes of people, you can tell so much by a person's silhouette just by their body language. So that's a good thing to practice if you are out painting people or painting from a photo. And another thing is, if they're walking towards you, they always have some kind of neck line showing. And if they're walking away from you, there's usually the back of them goes up kind of over their heads. So those are 2 other points about people walking. So I will just continue here and put in the, what I like to do is just put the color down that I'm thinking of using before I start the actual painting. So I use a brush for all of that. And I'm going to start with a little bit smaller brush and just kind of try to mix some of the colors that I'm going to be using, and just make like all the colors and values correct on my canvas. And then after that, I'll start using more of a palette knife approach. But I always start with the darks because, and I don't use any white at all at this point unless I need to. No, in fact, I just don't use any white. If I want those umbrellas to be really light, I'll just dip in my water and, wipe that out right now. And that's not even really necessary, but it also helps you. Like when I'm plein air painting, I don't draw with a pencil, so I'll just put the wash on and then put the highlights in there. So this is the other umbrella, which I didn't really draw, but that's kind of back there. Okay, and then the sky's going to be light also, but I don't want it to be lighter than the umbrellas. I want your eye to like jump to those umbrellas because they're so light, and then down here, these people are going to have, they're going to be the focal point, so they're going to have like maybe bright or magenta clothing on, and I think that waiter that I like so much will be there. So with the paper towel, I can put in, a lot of stuff. I might even put a little more dark, kind of, it's like a warm color, but it's also not where the sun is shining. It's the shadow part of the ground. And it's also good to establish where their feet will be. And the shadows of the ground will be somewhere around there. And this is darker here. So what's really going to draw your eye into the scene will be the sunlight streaming in here and across here to this table. So that's on the ground. So these will be a little light where shadows are. So paper towels are really great erasers. And I can't paint without one. One time, I was in Paris painting one time, and it was so cold. It was in November, and it was very, very cold. And I was out there by myself. My friends were out shopping or something, and cell phones didn't work at that time. That was in 2012, I think. So I set everything up on the street. It was like 45 degrees, and I forgot my paper towels. So I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I couldn't ask someone to watch my easel. I was right I think it was in Saint Germain area, right on this main boulevard there. So I decided that I was just going to use my palette knife and my apron. So I had no paper towel, and I just kept I used the palette knife, and I wiped everything on my apron. And it was like the best painting of my trip. So what that taught me was how to use a palette knife, because I knew I wouldn't have to clean brushes, and I could just, wipe this off. And it was a big eye-opener for me, and it was kind of one of the things that drove me to use more palette knife, because I didn't always use a lot. I always used it for buildings and straight edges. And if you want to start experimenting with the palette knife, that's what I suggest you start out with, just doing it for buildings and just practice using a knife, because there's so many really neat things you can do with it. But people are pretty hard to do, and I'll go back and forth. I'll use a brush, and I'll use a palette knife, and I'll use a little bit of both. But I would suggest that you just practice with the people with a paintbrush till you get the gestures and the body language, and maybe save your palette knife for buildings, because they're great for doing straight lines. And that's just, I think, one of the tips that I would tell someone. I think, like, if you're not used to doing the figure in your paintings, it would be best to start doing them with a brush, because it's a lot easier. And I can just show you a couple things with the people, the figures. I mean, no matter what they're going to wear, I usually put them down as a dark color first. And, I'll just put a head, and then their shoulders, and establish where the table's going to be. Now, actually, I'm not following my own advice. He should be lower. So all the rubbing and scraping just gives a little more atmosphere to your paintings. I don't mind doing that at all. I kind of like it. So if that's going to be the umbrella, they would probably be more down here. And I did do some sketches of kind of what I had in mind here to look at. So that's a little bit what I was thinking. Maybe more in reverse of that, but I can sit that down there to look at. So, and I keep it very loose. This will be the other person. So this waiter that I liked so much in my plein air painting from Havana is this guy down here. And I think I'm going to put him over here in reverse, because he's also going to draw your eye down to these people. And also maybe draw your eye up around here. So I'm going to just try to put him in reverse there. So this is usually how I start off with people. I'll just start with a dark color, because I can easily go over that with thick paint and make it a bright color, or change things as they go. But when you're doing people sitting at a table, you generally can't really see their legs. You can just see dark, shadowy shapes. And I know I have a lot of students, and they'll paint like blue jeans and white sneakers under the table, and you can't see that stuff. I mean, if you look at a table out in real life or a photograph, all you can see is maybe a little bit of light shining through the people. So keep that in mind. And then once I establish where I want the table to be, I always put in just a line for my own reference of where the table top will be, because that'll always be lighter because it captures the light. So I think that that's about what I want to do for that. So that's my main focus. So I'm starting off with the main focal point of the painting, which is right there. And that's going to be where she'll have a bright pink or red top, and he'll have a really bright blue or white shirt. So that's going to be my focal point. And then back here's another umbrella. And I wanted that one kind of leaning to give it a little more drama. So that'll be back there. So I'm just giving myself clues as to where I want these people to be. And for this color, it's just some of the Madder Lake and some of the transparent oxide red. And also keep in mind, which I did exactly what I want to tell you not to do, when you put the poles to the umbrella, that they don't go right into someone's head. So I will move that person over here a little bit, because you don't want an umbrella coming right out of somebody's head. So that's one of the main reasons I like to put these poles in from the start, so that when I put the person in, I make sure they're not don't have a pole coming out of their head. So then the other table will be back here. And I'm just giving a reference, and if the table's there. But see, even when they're sitting, ideally their heads will line up, so they might have to move down a little bit. And then when there's people walking, I wanted to show you how to do those. So this guy's head is up here. So that means everybody else that's walking, their heads should be like right about that same spot. So I like to tell little stories, to myself, like this is a couple, and then maybe over here's a guy by himself, and he's walking away. And these two, if they were a couple, they would be closer together, because you have to keep, remember to keep variety so you don't have them looking like fence posts. So if this is a couple, they could be closer together and walking towards the scene. This guy could be walking away, and I might change all that as I go also, but for now, that's kind of going to be the shady part. And then over here, these bottoms of these umbrellas kind of line up, because they're all in the same, it was the Plaza Viejo, and that was where all this, there were big cafes, like huge, huge cafes in the 5 plazas in Havana. So same thing here, there'll be a table of people, and I want to make sure the tabletops are lined up for the front table. And a lot of times when I'm painting outside, people come and go, so I'll pick who I like and paint them in, and then, maybe no one's there. Maybe no one's sitting at this table, but I like the people sitting over here, so I'll put them at that table. So you just have to be creative and go with the flow, because people don't stand still, and everything's always moving about. But here I have the luxury of just putting the people where I want them to be. So that's generally where I'm going to have the figures in the painting. And I actually have a second umbrella back here. I think I'm going to move this one over a little and put that second one in there, just kind of behind it. And then I can have more people sitting there. And then back here is so this is the building going down the street, and this is the side of the building. So I'm going to keep this more in the sunlight, and this is more in the sunlight, and then this side would be in the shadow. So I'll put a cooler color back there. Maybe not that dark. So that'll be in the shade. And then these people, the sun will be hitting the side of them. And then this side of the building will also be in shade. And that'll be good because it'll make this umbrella pop. And back behind them will be in the shade as well. And underneath this, this is like, they had all these porches with wrought iron railings in Cuba. It was really cool. And a lot of them had laundry hanging from them, which all the artists painted, which I did quite a few times too. But this was on the main plaza where there probably wasn't any laundry there, because that was like a pretty, more of a touristy area. I'm just putting in some of those lines that are in shade. Down here would be shady also. So I'm just establishing the, the lights and the darks. And you can see from the picture what I'm looking at. And then there was a lot of windows here, and that's going to be kind of what brings your eye around. They go around here and come down, and you go around here and come down to these people. So just these verticals going this way will indicate the windows. I'm going to keep that pretty simple and maybe put a tree over here. Just another thing to bring your eye back in. And then this back here, the steeple, which is one of my favorite things to paint. I want to keep it in the distance, so just by adding some blues and whites to it, it should push it back. And it's not really in the sunlight. I guess maybe this side would capture a little bit of sun, but I'm not worrying too much about any details back there. I just want it to be a distant thing that is more bluish, purplish. And that's way too dark. So if I don't know a color, I just mix what I think it's going to be and put it on there, and that's still pretty dark. So this is all just to establish the color and the value before I start actually putting a lot of paint on here. Like that. That's more the color that I want. So I will be bringing this painting over here that's backwards, just to make sure I have the values correct as I'm painting. It always amazes me, like this looks so light on my palette, and then when you put it up there, it's really not that light. And another favorite thing about Cuba was the red tile roofs, and there's not many in this painting, but there's a little bit of it back there. And normally I would make it really bright and orange, but since I want to keep that pushed back, it'll be a very subtle orange. So I'll just add a lot of white and grayish to that. So if I get the right color and the right value down on the canvas, then I won't struggle so much when I'm trying to mix it to paint, because I'll have this to compare it to. So just a little touch of the cad red light should help a little bit there. There was also some red up top here. So that's going to be very simple back there, but it's still going to be there. And then I'll put the roof lines in. So, I'll just measure the angle there and bring it over, and that looks pretty good. So that's might be a little dark, but when I mix the final color, I'm going to have to keep it lighter than that. And then this will be the sunlit area as well as this. This arch, I don't want a whole lot of contrast up there because I don't want your eye to get stuck up on that hard edge. Same as the sky, I want to keep the blue, a darker blue, up around the curve so that you don't look right there. Because if I made that as contrasty as it would be when you were standing out and looking out from an archway, this would probably be really light and this would be really dark. But I want your eye to look here, so I'm going to de-accentuate that and make it like a darker blue up there, because it would probably look pretty white. And for the sky color, I generally just take the ultramarine, unless it's a really blue sky. I have a color that's like cerulean phthalo, which is great if I'm in like Key West or somewhere, and it's more about the sky. But this painting is not about the sky. It's more just about the cafe. So I don't want it to be too, in fact, that's probably too dark, but I can go over it. And I'm kind of repeating the curve of the arch, and it'll get lighter as it comes down. And as it comes down towards the earth, the horizon, I always add a little bit of yellow and maybe even a little bit of the rose madder. Yeah, I want it to be even lighter than that. Okay, so now if I stand back and squint at that, it looks pretty much like my scene in general. The colors are of course off, and I didn't put a lot of stuff in there, but it gives me an idea of how to go about the painting. It's going to be darker down here. And underneath here it'll be darker. Same as over here. So I'm just dipping into this dark, muddy color I had to get some darks. That's too dark. I also have a light muddy color there, so just put that in. Because I don't want these colors down here to be anything that jump out at you. I just want them to set the stage for the umbrellas and the people. Because if it's dark behind them, they'll pop a little more. So, and this is like the side of the arch that's a little bit lighter than that, and I'll just paint that in later. But I think this is a good starting point for me. And of course, there'll be the windows here. And I really want to keep all this background stuff simple. It's going to say architecture, Cuban architecture, but it's not going to be very detailed at all. And there is, within the steeple, I do have a photo of that I brought along. I have a couple of them actually. But this was kind of where I took this view from. And so I can just kind of use that for some reference just to establish this steeple. Because it has I think the bell was in there, like the bell tower. And then there was a tall door here. And it doesn't have to be perfect. That's one of the things, when I used to plein air paint, I used to think, this has to be exactly how it looks. And then I started realizing that no one's going to go there and go, hey, she didn't put that at the right spot. Like, no one will ever know. And it's more about just composing a good painting than having everything like the way it really is. So that's kind of where the roof goes. And then there's a big, like, bright blue door here, but I don't want to put that there because I'll put the door there, but I won't make it bright blue because I just think that would be too distracting. Okay, so now when I step back and squint at that, it looks like what I want it to look like. I'll just put these in here a little bit. So you have to always be careful. Like, I don't want these lights to be really jumping out at you. Actually, in here, they do jump out at you too much, but I want them to be more kind of subtle background things. So since these people over under this umbrella are going to be my focal point, I'm just going to take the paper towel and this is another thing I always tell my students. When they try to wipe out, I'll see them like wiping out with this filthy paper towel. And I'll say, just make sure your finger is where it's a clean part. It sounds like such a silly thing to even tell people, but so many people do that. So that's going to be the one focal point. So I'm going to wipe that out right now while I still can. And then also the back of his shirt. Because they're under an umbrella, but his shoulder would, the way the sun's coming in, it would still hit him. And she's going to have a really bright, like pink or red or something on. And then, sometimes I'll even like draw in where their faces are. These are a little small, but. So I'm going to clean up my palette and get ready for using the palette knife on here. As I was cleaning my palette, I kind of realized that these things should be moved down. Like I'm happy with the tables and how they line up, but I do think this should be moved down. So I'm just gonna try to move that umbrella down and the people down a little bit. So it is important to step back. Obviously, everybody hears that you should do that, and not everybody does, including myself. So I'm just going to put some darks there to cover all that up so I can go back into it. So just remember, too, that what you do isn't set in stone. Like you can, just because sometimes I see artists that just because they drew it and spent a lot of time on it, they don't want to touch it anymore. They don't care if it's right or wrong. They just want to keep painting. So it is important to step back and, assess what you've done. Very important. So I think this umbrella should just be down farther. Yeah, that's better. And then the people would be down farther as well. So their heads would be, right around there. I mean, the tabletops, they pretty much would line up with each other, but the ones in the distance would be a little bit, up a little bit higher. But, I still want to keep their heads pretty lined up. So I'm a little happier with that. And same as the people, I don't know how they got up so high there, but they are standing on the same plane, so their heads should be more there. So, and then their feet should come down a little farther too. So I think it's good I stepped back and looked at it, because otherwise I would have been, finishing up my painting and said, hey, those people are too high, and that wouldn't have been good. So just gonna double check that. Yeah, that's better, I think. So I want some of these, like the guy in the more foreground here, to still be in the sunlight so the sunlight hitting their heads will be dancing you across here to these people. So I'm not sure exactly how that sunlight's going to work, but it's going to be a little bit in there, not too much right there. Okay. So it probably doesn't look like I did a whole lot there, but I'm happier with it now. So I guess the next step is to mix up a lot of paint and start working with the palette knife. Most likely, when I'm painting, I'll do the darks first, especially when you're outside plein air painting. Just try to do all your darks and then start adding the white, because if you add the white too soon, you're just going to get a lot of chalky, muddy colors. So keep like these darks, I'm going to try to keep, transparent is a little different with the palette knife, but I still want to, I don't want really thick darks. I want you to be able to see into the darks a little bit. So I'm using transparent colors, and I'm going to use them kind of thick, but I'm also going to try to let some of this color shine through, and hopefully that base color was dark enough. But if I'm thinking it's not, I could still make it a little bit darker. And one thing I always do, like, it sounds really kind of hard to believe, but I do it anyway. Like the ground that's closest to us I will make warmer, and as it gets up here, it is a little farther away from us. I mean, not a whole lot, but I'll make that a little cooler. Underneath, I'll put more of the permanent green deep up here just to keep it a cooler, darker color. So just by doing that, it'll remind me to keep that a little cooler. Especially this corner over here, that's like the farthest away. So that way, if some paint, if there's some areas that aren't covered real well with the palette knife, the color that shines through I'll still be okay with. I'll even put some green up there for variety. Okay. So if I put this dark frame in, it's kind of like a frame that draws you into the distance. So I'm going to mix up a lot of darks, a lot of dark, more transparent colors. So there was some white in there. I'm just going to move that over here. And this was what I call my pot of dark paint, but it's kind of disappeared. So I'm going to just take some of the ultramarine, some of the green, some of the Madder Lake, and a little bit of the transparent oxide red, and just mix it together and make a nice dark. And it's like really too dark, but I can use it for maybe for my to grab from for my darks throughout the whole painting. So I'm going to just take some of that and make it a little lighter by adding. I want this to have more of a warm kind of feel like it does over there. So I'm adding more red and more transparent oxide red, and then some white, just to lighten it up. One thing I forgot to do is I'll put a lot of white out now at this time. And I generally mix up two things of white, one that's cool and one that's warm. So as I'm mixing colors, if it's a warm area and it's light, I would use that there. And if it's a cool area and it's light, I would use it back there. So if I start out with those, so some of this leftover paint that I had from yesterday, I think it's more on the warm side. So this will be my warm white. I'm going to add a lot of white to it. And then just some of the different yellows that I have over here to make it like a warmer white. In fact, I can add a lot of lemon and cad medium deep. So it's like a light color, but it's still warm. And then I'll take some more white over here and add some of the ultramarine and some of the permanent green deep. And you don't need much at all, because especially the permanent green deep, it can kind of overpower it. But then just as I'm working, if I want to lighten something up on the shadow side, I'll use this white. And if I want to lighten something up on the warm side, I'll use that light. Okay. All right, so since this is the cool part, I'm going to add a little of the cool color to here. It's one of those things you don't know if the color is going to be good till you put some up there. And I see that that's very dark, and I want it to be a little bit warmer. So I'm going to put some yellow ochre in with it. So the hardest part about painting in general and palette knife painting is just getting the right color the right value. So I'll spend a lot of time mixing before I even put a lot of paint up there, because I want to get the right hue, the right value, the right chroma. And obviously this is not going to be a highly chromatic area because it's supposed to sit back. So it's really still too dark. So instead of trying to mix that huge amount, I'm going to just put some of that over there and add to this. That's why I like having this big palette, because it gives me a lot of mixing areas, and then if I like certain colors, I can save them off to the side and use them later. So it just seems like I need a lot more Madder Lake and some white. A lot more white. Because once I get the color I like, I'm going to need pretty much paint. Okay, so that's getting close. And I'm going to grab this study that I did, because I did like the colors on there. And so that is actually pretty close to that. And I can always, if I don't like it, I can scrape it off. So it's nothing set in stone. And I like variety. I mean, the buildings in Cuba are all old and crumbly, and they're not like perfect stucco buildings. So I like to have variety in there. Some of that underneath paint that's showing through, I like that too. So I'm very roughly putting that in there. And I'm going to use some of this and make it even warmer by putting some yellow ochre towards the bottom, since that's closer to us and it could be warmer. And when I'm doing the figure, I'll encroach on the figure more than it'll actually be, so then when I put the figure in, I can go over it a little bit, because it's better to make your figures really thin, and then when you go do the painting, you can paint on top of them. Because if you make them really wide, then you run out of background, and you got to make your people really wide, and then you get in trouble. So I'm really just covering this up with paint. So it's warmer at the bottom, and it gets cooler as it goes up. And I can, if I want to come back and adjust this, it's not going to be a problem, because I have so much paint here that I could almost use it, to paint with without mixing more. And when I go to do these background buildings, maybe I'll get some in there, and then I'll have a pot of it over here to grab from to fix up those lines. And then I'm using the warmer area as I go down. I'm just going to throw a little darks down here too, just for variety. Because you do want variety. You don't want like this solid brownish color wall. That would be very boring. So, okay, so I know there's going to be a figure there. And down here, it's just going to be, just going to put some color down for now, and I will be adjusting that after I get the figures in, because they'll cast some type of shadow across here. And I also like just putting in a little viridian to add, I call it viridian, but it's the permanent green deep. Okay, so the bottom's kind of filled with paint. And you do have to watch out when you're using the knife that you don't get peaks. And I'm not getting any here because it's kind of a flat area. But when I do the umbrellas and stuff, sometimes when you lift the palette knife, it makes like this little peak, and then it captures the reflections, and it doesn't always look good. So that's one thing you have to be careful of. Kind of when you're done, is just make sure that you look at it from the side and make sure there's not some ugly bump sticking out. They're going to capture the light, because especially in the dark areas, if it's really thick, it captures the light, bounces around, and it makes it look lighter than you actually want it to. So you do have to keep the darks not real thick. So that's why I'm kind of scraping over it, you know, like I am, letting some shine through. And one thing that I do that I forgot to mention, sometimes the darks get annoyingly shiny. This Cobra paint dries pretty glossy no matter, like I don't use any medium, I just use straight paint. But if I use some, for the darks, I use some cold wax medium, and I'll just blend it into my pot of dark. It just keeps it from getting too shiny and distracting. And a lot of times I forget to do that while I'm painting, which I did today. But then when you're all done, you can actually kind of, it's called, you would varnish it, but you could actually rub, when it's completely dry, rub the cold wax medium over it and then buff it. And it gives it like not such a shiny, glossy feel. So I have that now in this new darker color, but as I put that over there, that'll be helping. I also want to keep this light enough back here that when I put the darks of the lamp, they will actually show up a little bit. Like I said before, I don't want them to be too distracting. And I generally make the corners of the canvas darker because it's kind of like a vignette. It just brings you in more towards the center. Okay, so that's just kind of where the archway ends. Just an indication of like the step or whatever that goes down there. And this is actually a corner arch. So I'll just put a slight indication of like if it went in and then out, which is what it does, but it's not anything that's that important. I'll just have a little indication here. Okay. So I totally lost that lamp, but I believe it was right about here. So I can just wipe it out a little bit so I remember where it was. So it's kind of like with the knife, it's kind of like sculpting, you know, like I put in all this paint and then I'll move it back and forth as I develop the painting. Like that's not done unless I'm, you know, maybe it's close to done, but as far as I'm concerned, I'll still be manipulating the background. But at least it's there and it gives me the value to work within to get the background. And I should also do the side of this arch. While I have this color mixed, I'll just mix some light with it. And the warmer light. And just see how that looks. It's just kind of like the edge. And that's not much of a contrast, so I need to add more white. And sometimes with the knife, you know, like it works perfect the first time through, and sometimes it takes 5 times to get it to work. So you just have to be patient, and you really have to practice with the knife. I mean, I've been working with it for years for buildings and flat surfaces, but I've only recently, within the past year or 2, been using it like almost exclusively. So you just need a lot of practice and learn, you know, what the knife does.
Imagine painting something to such a high standard. Your friends, family, and even other art connoisseurs were convinced it was painted by a pro. And what if we told you there was a way to paint that will get your paintings noticed and taken to a new level? A level that even a professional artist would be proud of, without spending thousands of dollars on classes and workshops. Well, now there is. In this brand new exclusive painting course, you can discover how to produce incredible paintings that will wow your viewers by using a palette knife. Whether you use a palette knife to create figures or buildings or trees for just part of a painting or the whole thing, you'll see your paintings come alive. People seem to respond to the abstract nature of palette knife paintings. Nationally known artist Michele Byrne, author of The Art of Conversation and 3 other books and DVDs on painting, has become known for her stunning palette knife paintings. In this 4.5-hour video, she takes you step by step through the entire process, saving you months of experimentation. In this video course, you will discover an easy way to make any figures you paint pop from the canvas. A huge mistake a lot of artists make when drawing a person's head. Why Michele keeps a certain tool in her backpack all the time. And even a ninja way of making people appear in your paintings without actually painting them. How to paint architecture that feels real. How to use the knife to create energy. You'll also receive in-depth training on using the palette knife to lay in color and shadow, plus a whole lot more. Learning to paint with a palette knife is one of the best and fastest ways to take your skill as a painter to a whole new level.
Just keep doing it, just keep trying, and just keep practicing, and just get out there. Don't worry about what people think or say. Just do it and try it, and just keep trying and practice.
Palette Knife Painting with Michele Byrne is now available on DVD and streaming video.
Well, that is palette knife painting, and that's Michele Byrne. You can learn more about her full-length video on palette knife painting at lilyartvideo.com. Today we have a special discount, and the code is in the comments section. Take advantage of it today only. Now let's get right to our interview with Michele. Hi, I'm Eric Rhodes, publisher of Fine Art Connoisseur and Plein Air magazine. Today, we're with artist Michele Byrne. Hey, Michele, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
We're glad you're here.
It's nice to be here.
So what I want to do today is to get inside your head a little bit, understand what makes you tick. But first off, let's kind of talk about history.
Okay.
So you live where?
I live in a small town called Wyomissing, Pennsylvania, and it's like a suburb of Philadelphia, about an hour and a half west of Philadelphia.
And you grew up in that area?
I grew up just a little more west than that, but basically same area, yeah.
So how did this whole painting thing start for you?
Well, it started pretty far back, actually.
How far back?
Let's see. I remember as like a 5-year-old, 4-year-old just sitting. I lived in the country, and there weren't a lot of kids to play with, so I remember sitting at those little snack TV trays in the living room and playing my dad's music and just drawing from his, like, whatever magazines were laying around. I was just always drawing. And then I started kindergarten, and I remember the teacher, we were all making Santa Clauses for Christmas, and the teacher said, "Oh, we're going to put Michelle's up on the bulletin board because she's a good artist." And I went, "Oh, wow." Like, I didn't know. I was home drawing by myself all the time, and I went home and I'm going to be an artist. Like, I decided in kindergarten, as soon as she said that, I was going to be an artist. So that's all I wanted to do. And
So you liked the feeling of having it pinned up on the bulletin board?
I loved it, yes.
Yeah, and you're still doing that today.
Yeah. So, yeah, and luckily my parents, neither of them had any kind of art background, but they saw how much I loved it, so they took me to an oil painting class when I was 8. And it was in a barn in the country, and I went upstairs with all these adults and just started painting with oil paintings. And they were terrible, but, you know, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, but oil paints at 8 years old.
Yeah, they wouldn't do that today, but, and mostly we painted covered bridges, and I remember a painting of a stone house called Daniel Boone Homestead, and it looked like a lot of Rice Krispie. I always called it later my Rice Krispie house because I painted every little stone.
And do you remember the name of the instructor?
It was called Kitsch's Barn Studio or something, yeah. It's still there as a barn, but it's not an art studio anymore.
Okay.
And we painted a lot of covered bridges, and to this day I don't really like painting them because it just reminds me of the bad paintings I did back then.
Well, you'll have to correct that and do a good one of a covered bridge.
Yeah, I actually did do a good one a couple years ago, and it's in the permanent collection of the Bennington Museum of Art. Is that what it's
Oh,
called?
the Bennington in Vermont.
Yeah.
Oh, what a great museum.
Yeah, so I'm thrilled that actually a covered bridge painting of mine ended up there.
Yeah.
It's one of the
So
few
is
I've
that
done.
the only museum you're aware of?
Yeah, pretty much. There's a big collector of mine in Florida, Michael Manello, and he has this amazing collection of artwork, and he just bought 8 of my paintings, and they're going to be in his future museum when he has one. Well, he has a museum now, but he wants his whole collection to be in one, so.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty unusual. Most artists, most living artists, don't get into museums until they're much, much older, sometimes not until they're passed, and so that's pretty good that you're...
Yeah, I'm excited about that, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So you started out doing covered bridges, but you don't really do landscapes per se so much. You do a lot of urban scenes,
Right.
a lot of buildings, a lot of architecture, a lot of figures in your paintings.
Right.
What is it about that that gets you excited?
I'm not sure. I know that I love the landscapes and I love nature and I love to hike and be in it. But when I'm painting it, honestly, I just get a little bored, you know, like here's the mountain and here's the stream, and it's like, okay, now what? I don't really enjoy painting unless there's a building in it or a structure or a person. That's what excites me. And I don't really know why. I know years ago, like maybe 20 some years ago, I would go with friends, and I was painting in watercolors at the time, and I would go with a group of friends to Jamaica. And my friend Helen and I would go out on our bicycles and we'd go out and we'd paint like watercolors. And I just started putting people in, and I remember her and the other people saying, wow, you just put people in just like that. How do you do that? And I was like, I don't know, I like it. It adds life to my paintings. For me, it's like it makes them exciting. So I just kept going with it, and then it's just become something that, to me, a painting that I do is kind of not finished unless there's a person. Sometimes, like I was in Wyoming doing the beautiful Tetons, and I didn't put people in those, but in general, I love structures, I love ancient architecture. I used to go to France a lot to paint, and I love the intermingling of the people and the conversations, and they just bring a lot of life to my work, and it's...
Well, artist Joe McGurl says that if you put a figure in a painting, like in a landscape painting, the painting becomes about the figure, not the landscape.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I think there's that face factor that as soon as you put a person in, that's your central focus. So, but that's what I paint. So.
And you were saying when we were talking earlier that you really love being around people and you like it when people talk to you when you're painting. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I know most artists, like, they hate to paint in the city because they hate being distracted. And I'm the opposite. I think it might be because I grew up very shy and didn't know how to talk to people. And
maybe because you grew up in the country.
Yeah, maybe. And that's probably why I'm attracted to the city, too, because I grew up in the country. But, you know, typically, if I'm home painting in the studio, I'm at home painting in the studio, and it's just me. So when I'm out on the street, people just come, it's like a magnet. People just come and talk to you, and I don't get annoyed by it. I actually enjoy it. And my favorite part is when people come up and, like, I see this glimmer in their eye. I can remember a couple instances in Key West, like I was painting in this restaurant called Blue Heaven, And one of the kitchen workers came out, and I think he was from the Bahamas, you know, a young guy. And he kept walking by and looking and looking and looking. And finally he stopped and he goes, you know, I used to draw a lot. And he just had this like sparkle, and like the child in him was coming back as I was talking to him. And I love that. And I was like, well, you should go home and try it, you know, get out your stuff and start drawing again. And I love just the look I see in people's face when they go, oh, I used to paint, or I always wanted to go out and paint. And I'll say, do it, go do it, you know. And
well, you know, that's, as you know, a while back I started a thing called the plein air force.
Right.
And the idea is to get more people painting in plein air. And one of the things that I love when I'm outside painting is when a family comes up and they have a child, I always say, okay, here kid, take this brush, dip it in here, and I'll take their hand and I'll show them how to make a brush stroke.
Cool.
And then I'll let them do it. I don't care if they mess up my painting, because I can always fix it, right?
Yeah.
And then they light up and the parents light up. Or the other thing that I find is that the thing I hear most is, I wish I could do that, I don't have any talent. And I tell people, it's not about having talent, it's a process. If you can learn to cook, if you can learn to type, you can learn to paint. And you know, maybe talent enters into it in the last 10% after you've been painting for a while.
Exactly.
But I want them to find painting and find the joy in it. So I think it's really interesting that you're encouraging people.
Yeah, I just love doing that. In fact, I'm teaching a class in Key West, and someone from Pennsylvania just emailed me, and she said, I want to try plein air painting, but I'm scared to death. Yeah. So she's coming to Key West, and I said, well, you're going to love it. Everybody's out there painting. No one's going to like look down on you, and people kind of admire you just for having the courage to stand out there and do it, you know. And I've never had anyone insult what I was doing. Like, sometimes there's just like a brown blob on there, and they'll go, oh, it's beautiful. And I haven't even done anything yet. So people are
You're the master of brown blobs.
Yeah.
Well, you know, what would you say to somebody who's watching this, who maybe has heard about plein air painting? If you're not familiar with the term plein air painting, plein air is a French term which essentially means outdoors. So it's outdoor painting, painting on location like Monet used to do in France, right? So what would you say to people about learning to paint outdoors?
I would say just go out in your backyard and try it on your own without being intimidated by what people are going to say, and just go out and try it. And for me, it's a very spiritual thing. Like, if I'm out painting, I just get really excited and happy, you know. I'm a happy person. And I was saying earlier to someone that every single painting I've ever done plein air in my whole life, I can look at it and tell you where I was, who I was standing with, and what we were talking about. Yeah. Like, it's etched in my memory. And something that I did in the studio, it's like, oh yeah, I did that in the studio. I have no idea what day that was or when that was or anything.
Well, and for me, they're like my children.
Yeah.
Not my real children, I have real children too, but I have a hard time getting rid of a plein air study, because they're like a document of my life.
Exactly.
You know, of the moments, you know, I can remember one time painting and a deer leaped over a fence right in front of me, and I wish I had some way to, you know, mentally remember how to get that deer in there. You'd probably do it with a brown blob.
Yeah,
but I think it's fascinating and fun for people to try it.
I think it is, and it's just, I love interacting with the people, and something about plein air painting and adding the way I do the figures, they're much looser and fluid when I'm doing them plein air, because they're not standing still, they're moving, and it's not easy to do, but it gives the painting some excitement and action and drama. And if I was doing those people at home in my studio, they tend to get stiff. Yeah. So even when I'm painting figures at home in my studio, I give myself like a time limit. Okay, I'm gonna have all these people in before I eat lunch, or something to make me hurry so that I don't get, you know, caught in painting all the details of the people. I just want the action and the feeling that you get when you have human interaction. That's kind of what I'm picking up on. Like, I love personally to sit under an umbrella outside in the sun and talk to my friends. Like, that's one of my favorite things to do. So that's why I like to paint it.
And that's why you put some umbrellas in your paintings, yes. Sometimes anyway.
Yeah.
So you were a single mom for a lot of years.
I was.
Your kids were 3 and 5. Is that right?
Yeah, they were 3 and 5 when I got. In fact, Seamus just turned 3, so they were very young, very, very young.
And while you were being a mom, were you a professional artist at that time?
No, I was a graphic designer, but I was a freelance graphic designer, so I would work in my office while they were home, you know, and it was very difficult. So I would try to get up early and work. Well, I couldn't get up early before then, but I would stay up late and work into the wee hours of the night to get my graphic design done. And I just kept working. I'd take them to the pool, and at that time I had a brand new giant laptop, you know, and I'd sit at the pool and try to do some work. That didn't work too well either. But I just worked really hard, and I always wanted to paint. And I remember, you know how years ago you'd get an email and it would say, make a wish, you know, and I would say, I just want to be a full-time painter. I just want to be a full-time painter. Like, I wished that so bad. And then when September 11th happened in 2001, a lot of my graphic design clients, they said, well, we're going to save money and do this stuff in-house, because desktop publishing had become kind of ordinary, and everybody decided they were going to do their own stuff. So I thought, well, this is a good time to, because I used to do graphic, when the kids went to school, then I'd do graphic design during the day and paint at night. And then I kind of flipped it around where I would do painting all day and do graphic design at night when they went to bed. And then as my painting got better and things started picking up, then eventually I stopped doing graphic design and I just painted.
So how did you know when you were ready to go out into the market?
I might have gone out before I was ready.
Yeah.
But at the time, I think it was 1997, around there, I knew some friends that knew a woman named Barbara Doherty, and she at the time was the publisher of Art Calendar magazine. And they said, you should talk to Barb. She does art consulting, and she can maybe help you figure out how to make a living at it. So I took like 20 paintings, put them in my minivan, and drove 4 hours south to the southern tip of Maryland and met with her. I stayed there all weekend. I put out my paintings, and she was like so encouraging. Like, she was like, oh, you have this theme going on here. You have people everywhere. People are talking. And we kind of brainstormed and came up with the art of conversation as the theme. And I remember at the time I had a little handheld tape recorder, and I taped, you know, what she had said to me, because she was a genius, I believe. She just passed away like about a year and a half ago. But I remember driving home and talking into the tape going, I can't believe it. I think I can make a living as an artist. Like, she so much encouraged me. And she said, there's people out there that are making good money selling their art, and you can do it. And I was like, I was just so excited. No one had ever told me that. I grew up with people saying, you can't make a living as an artist, be a graphic designer, be an architect. Like, told me all kinds of things that I couldn't do, that I couldn't be an artist. So she instilled in me that I could, and it was really a turning point in my life. So I went home, and she suggested I do a book. And at the time, books were not like you could just self-publish your own book like you can now. So it was a major deal, and I did a whole book, I think 25 or 30 paintings of people in conversation. And I look back at them now, and they weren't really that good, but...
Well, why did she suggest a book? Was that a marketing ploy?
It was, and it made me like a step above other artists. I had a published book. So at the time, I was doing a lot of the outdoor, set up a tent, sell your artwork. And, you know, I came on the scene. My paintings were really, really cheap, and I had a book. And people were like, they were waiting in line. I remember one year, like, people waiting in line. I want that one, I'll take that one. I was like flustered and sweaty and hot. It was
what a nice problem to have.
I was in Delaware, and I was like, okay, just a minute, I gotta wrap this one up. And someone was like, but I want that one. And it was just like amazing. What year was that? It was probably like 2002 or 3.
Well, there's nothing like that would give you encouragement. That's terrific.
So that was just like this fabulous start. And when the book came out, people thought, you know, oh, she has a book. She must be really good, you know. So it was a really good thing to do. And then she was the one that encouraged me to plein air paint. She lived in Snow Hill, Maryland, and they had this plein air event where it was just like 60 people would come and paint. It wasn't a competition. It would just be like a gathering of people. And she said, why don't you come to this plein air event? And I said, what's that? You know, because I had been painting outside in Jamaica, but I didn't know that you called that plein air. So I went, and it was really fun. And then she said, why don't you do some of the juried ones? So I got into Annapolis, had a plein air one. The first competition I ever did, I think it was in 2006. And I remember I wanted to do a cafe scene. And like, I didn't know anything about this. So I walked down the street, and I asked this guy, David Diaz, who now I'm friends with, I said, are there any cafes around? He goes, oh, at the top of the hill, there's one called something Browns. I can't remember what it was. So I went up there not knowing any better, put a big 16 by 20 on my canvas and just did this really loose, crazy, not good painting of a cafe. And I get to the show and everybody has these really dark, small, muted color, boat scenes. And I'm like, oh my God, like I just painted what I wanted to without even thinking it. It was kind of intimidating. And I was embarrassed to hang my paintings on the wall. And I ended up winning second prize.
Oh, wow.
I think because it was just so bizarre. And Stapleton Kearns was the judge. And I told him a couple years ago, and he goes, well, I don't remember that. I said, well, I remember it, and it was a big impact. And I won this prize, and I just went yeah, I'm doing these competitions. And I just went wild, and I did every one I could possibly get into. And
so you've just told 2 or 3 stories about the impact of other people and their encouragement on your career.
Exactly, yeah.
And I think that's a good lesson to us all to look for those opportunities to encourage people, because you never know what you're going to say that's going to impact somebody. I mean, you were kind of pushed into it, and
yeah, exactly.
Really worked out well for you.
Yeah, and there's been so many kind people along the way, because I remember when I did that first plein air event in Annapolis, the guy that won top prize, I said, I don't know, I had a French easel, and I was like, what's better than this? And he told me what tripod to get. He said, get an open box M, and he sent me this long email, and I was so kind of him. I mean, he was the top painter that won the top prize, and he took the time to tell me all that information, and I just think people like that are wonderful. So I try to carry that forth and help people as well.
Well, you're kind of living a dream now. When we started Plein Air magazine, I don't think there were 10 plein air events in America. Now there's probably 250, 300
really?
of them.
Wow.
You're living a really interesting life, it appears, because you're traveling from event to event. Not a lot of events. You're being judicious about that and not being overexposed.
Right.
But what's that life like? It sounds glamorous.
Yeah.
Is it?
Well, I wouldn't say it's glamorous, but but it's fun. I mean, I love to travel, love to travel. So I have to try to keep it a little calmed down, because the constant packing and shipping, the logistics of it all, I was gonna try to not do many this summer, and then I got invited to Jackson Hole for the Rocky Mountain Plein Air Painters, and I was like, oh, I've never been there. How can I say no? I have to go, So I'm so glad I did, and I got to see it. But what I hate is you have to decide how many paintings you think you're going to want to do, what size you think you want to do, and send the frames. And that part of it I hate, absolutely hate. So I prefer to do ones where I can drive to, because I can just fill up my minivan with everything I might possibly need. But I do love to travel, and I say this year that I'm going to try to do less and stay home and do more studio work, but I know that if I get invited somewhere new, I'm going to want to go.
Yeah.
Same as Cuba. When you sent out that email about Cuba, I was like, yeah, I want to go. I pushed the button and paid my fee 5 minutes after I got.
I think you were the first or second
I might
one.
have been, yeah. I was like, yeah, I want to go to Cuba. I always wanted to go there. So it's...
Well, tell people about that trip, because I don't talk about it much. What did that mean to you?
I kind of changed my style a little bit. It was something... Well, first of all, we didn't have a whole lot of time to do each painting, so they had to be rather quick. And I was using the palette knife, and that Cuban music was playing constantly, and the people were extremely friendly. The architecture was old, which I love. The people were friendly, and I just kind of went wild. And my paintings were just looser than they've ever been and more thick paint than I've ever used. And it kind of taught me something about painting fast, but I also learned something about having a better composition. So.
Well, there's something else that happens at those events. You've been to that event, you've been to my event in the Adirondacks, the Publishers Invitational. Right. And there's something about when you paint a couple of paintings, 2 or 3 paintings a day, every day for 5 or 6 days, it changes how you paint.
Oh, exactly.
It's concentrated practice time.
Exactly.
And by being around the influences of all the other painters, you're picking up tips, even though there's no workshop or no instructor.
Right.
You're talking to other people, you're bringing your work in at night, seeing how they address the same scene, and it all has a a profound impact, doesn't it?
It does, it really does. And just by talking to other people, encouraging other people encouraging you. And like you said, like I remember one day in Cuba, the first day it rained and we didn't paint, or we didn't paint much, maybe just one. The second day, I had this idea I wanted to do 2 a day. So since I had only done 1 the first day, I had to do 3 the second day, you know,
Right.
like I put this pressure on myself. But the third one that I did that day, it just like flew off my palette knife. The whole painting, it was just like my favorite one.
Yeah.
So you get into that mode, like you said, and you know, I don't, when I'm home, paint 3 paintings in a day, ever, you know. But
Yeah.
when you're out there traveling and, you know, some of them may be really bad, but sometimes the last one of the day just comes off really fast and really good, and it's a kind of magical thing.
When you do studio paintings at home,
Mm-hmm.
do you paint larger?
I do, yeah.
And do you paint the same as you would outdoors? In other words, will you finish a painting in a sitting, or will you work on that painting for days or weeks or months?
Well, I try to spend more time on the composition, which is what I'm working on now, is working on my composition. So I'll spend more time preparing for the painting, but generally, even if the painting is 30 by 40, I try to, what I've been doing lately is do the whole drawing in a value study kind of thing.
Explain that for people who might not know what a value study is.
Well, I'll just like pick a color and do like where the focal point is going to be. I'll make that, you know, the darkest dark, the lightest light, and make sure that that's the focal point. And then the rest I'll just draw it in with a paintbrush, the composition, you know. And then the next day, with the palette knife, it's like you kind of have to do it all at once. I do anyway.
Because it's wet, you
Yeah.
got to move the paint.
Yeah, so in the wintertime, I have the luxury of putting it out in my cold room and it won't dry as fast. But in the summertime, I will fill that thing up with all the palette knife I possibly can and do it in one day. And then the next day I might adjust it and then adjust it a little bit more, because the next day it gets like a little sticky and different things happen to it. And then I'll have to wait a whole week and maybe adjust it with glazes or something. So I don't do the whole painting in one day, but I apply all the thick paint. I try to do that in one day, or at least maybe the top of it, that's going to be all cohesive, and then do the bottom of it the next day. Like I try to get all the thick palette knife paint done in a day or 2.
I remember you telling me that you had a transformational moment, and I think it had to do with another artist encouraging you, but it had to do with going from being a paintbrush painter to being a palette knife painter. Tell me about that and what the result was.
Well, that was C.W. Mundy. I took a workshop with him, and I had used the palette knife a lot throughout the years, like for buildings and straight things, but I always wanted to use more paint. And I just couldn't seem to make the paint as thick as I wanted to. So he's just the most fabulous teacher I've ever had, you know, with his accent. Well, you just mix a big pot of paint, like a huge pile. And I was like, wow, I'd have never dreamed of mixing that much paint on my palette. And I still struggle with using that much paint. But
Well, the paint companies love it when you do that.
Yeah. So that was like a big change for me. And I actually learned how to use thick paint and apply it, and he was just fabulous. And he's a friend of mine now, and I adore his way of teaching. He's such a kind soul, and it really changed my paintings. And I got back from that class, and people were like, wow, I love the thick paint, you know, and it changed, and I've been selling more paintings, and it was definitely a turning point, yeah.
Well, your paintings were beautiful, but they've really transformed considerably since you've gone to all palette knife. And you know, that's kind of rare. There are not a lot of people who do all palette knife paintings.
Yeah, well, it's
and
fun.
yours aren't 100% palette knife.
No, I'd say 90%, but it's fun. And I think I was getting to the point with my brush paintings where it was like, okay, I draw it in and then I fill it in with paint. It was just kind of getting to be like, not boring, but it was the same. I was doing the same thing. And the palette knife has got me like, I feel really out of control a lot of times, yeah. And it's kind of good, because then I'm scraping and moving and manipulating. And you know, like I remember in Cuba, one of the first paintings, that was one where this man was watching me the whole entire time, this Cuban man, and talking to me in his language the whole entire time. And I was like,
Spanish.
so, yeah, I was so struggling, and it was like, oh my God. And I was scraping and pushing and pulling it. But in the end, it turned out good. So that struggle, for me, is a good thing. sounds bizarre, but
No, I think it is a good thing. It's tough when you've got people who are watching
yeah,
you
exactly.
and an audience,
Yes.
and you kind of want to perform for them.
Right.
So I was just in Florence with Daniel Graves, the
Wow.
great instructor at the Florence Academy. And Daniel said, our world is focusing too much on technique and copying what we see, but a great artist goes beyond that and has something to say. What is it that you have to say?
I guess what I have to say is that my paintings are all about the interaction of people, you know, and they have a spirit in them, I think, that people somehow catch it, you know, they get it, and that's very rewarding for me. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I have a hard time with people not getting along. I think, like, I try to capture people like having a good time and being together and celebrating life and having fun. So my paintings give people a good feeling, and that's what I like to put into my paintings, and that's the story I'm trying to tell. It's just to get together with your friends and interact, and it's a whole communication kind of thing that I'm trying to capture.
Well, you've captured it beautifully, and your paintings really sing. They're really special. What have we not talked about that maybe you'd like to share with our people, maybe some people who are kind of learning to paint or trying to figure out what they're going to do with their careers? What do you have to say to them?
That it's just always a struggle, you know, like I may seem like I know what I'm doing, but you know, I'm really doubting my composition and my color mixture, and I think if you're ever really happy and think you're great, then you're in trouble. But the art world is just this total constant learning, and just keep learning and keep trying, and I mean, that's what I would advise anybody, because it's just like unending, the amount you can learn. And I think art keeps people alive. I know people that, there was a woman in the Philadelphia area that she lived to be 101, and when she died, she had a painting on her easel that was still in progress. And it's like, she was probably thinking, I'm gonna get this yet, you know, and she was a good artist, but I just think it's a wonderful thing, and just to keep trying and keep growing is just a fabulous way to live. I think as artists, we live longer because we have this energy and excitement about what we're doing.
Absolutely. It changes people's lives.
Yeah.
It changed my life. I'm sure it changed your life when you started painting.
Oh, yeah.
And you've been doing it, you essentially have been doing it your whole life.
Yeah, pretty
So
much.
I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, when I was raising the kids, I remember my goal was to get one painting done every year.
One painting a year?
A year. But they were watercolors, and they were really tight, and I had babies to take care of, you know, so.
Right.
So, but I've gone way beyond that, yeah.
Now, how many are you doing a year now?
I don't know, for the first time in my life, I started that artist archive, and I'm actually having a record of my paintings. So, I mean, for this year, it's up to 136 or something, but that includes little ones and big ones, so. But it's nice to actually have a record of things.
Absolutely. Well, for the next book.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. I always had a dream. I did a second book called The Art of Conversation Manhattan. And for some reason, that book, I just got like, oh, I'm doing a book. It wasn't like quite as fun and carefree as the first one, and they got really, really tight. And I always wanted to do a book of Paris. And people still say to me, when's your Paris book coming out? And it's like, no, I don't know.
I'm going with you.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
Yeah. We're
So
going to have a great time painting Paris.
Yeah, so I've been there a couple of times, and I've painted it. And now I think with my new style, I would really, really enjoy it. But I don't know if it's going to happen or not.
No, I think you need to do it, and you need to do it this year.
Oh, this year? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Get it
All right.
done.
Okay. How about 2017, next year?
2017.
Okay.
All right. Well, Michele, thank you for your time and for your generosity. You're an inspiration to us all. Your paintings are beautiful, and
Oh, thank you.
you really have a terrific spirit about you, and thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me. It's been fun.
Well, that's Michele Byrne and palette knife painting. You can learn more about the video at lilyartvideo.com. And a reminder, we have a discount code today only in the comments section. Also want to remind you to share this video with others so they can discover these videos as well. And I want to remind you, we have a free video called 97 Amazing Painting Secrets from the World's Leading Artists. It's a 2-hour video at a $100 value. You can get yours for free at 97tips.com. Hey, thank you for watching. I'm Eric Rhodes.
Imagine painting something to such a high standard, your friends, family, and even other art connoisseurs were convinced it was painted by a pro. And what if we told you there was a way to paint that will get your paintings noticed and taken to a new level, a level that even a professional artist would be proud of, without spending thousands of dollars on classes and workshops? Well, now there is. In this brand new exclusive painting course, you can discover how to produce incredible paintings that will wow your viewers by using a palette knife. Whether you use a palette knife to create figures or buildings or trees for just part of a painting or the whole thing, you'll see your paintings come alive. People seem to respond to the abstract nature of palette knife paintings. Nationally known artist Michele Byrne, author of The Art of Conversation and 3 other books and DVDs on painting, has become known for her stunning palette knife paintings. In this 4.5-hour video, she takes you step by step through the entire process, saving you months of experimentation. In this video course, you will discover an easy way to make any figures you paint pop from the canvas. A huge mistake a lot of artists make when drawing a person's head. Why Michele keeps a certain tool in her backpack all the time. And even a ninja way of making people appear in your paintings without actually painting them. How to paint architecture that feels real. How to use the knife to create energy. You'll also receive in-depth training on using the palette knife to lay in color and shadow, plus a whole lot more. Learning to paint with a palette knife is one of the best and fastest ways to take your skill as a painter to a whole new level.
Just keep doing it, and just keep trying, and just keep practicing, and just get out there. Don't worry about what people think or say. Just do it and try it, and just keep trying and practice.
Palette Knife Painting with Michele Byrne is now available on DVD and streaming video.